All right. Now I do things simply because I'm a simple man. I'm not going to talk a lot about Six Sigma or anything like that. I'm just going to talk about simple ways to improve processes to make it easy so that you make things bigger or easier in your organization. And the first step to any process improvement is you can't control what you do not understand. And if you don't understand what's going on in a process, in a system, in a service, you're not going to get anywhere. And it's very similar to going through med school or any other education. We start with the basics, and then we add the things that are wrong, and then eventually we learn how to detect problems and treat them. Now, Robert Humphrey, who was one of the early minds in process improvement, said, an undefined problem has an infinite number of solutions. And when you have an infinite number of solutions, it becomes really hard to choose. But if you have a defined problem, then it becomes much easier to figure out how to fix that problem. Okay. And Albert Einstein, I liked what he said. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about it, the problem. So, and then 5 minutes thinking about solutions. Again, Albert's saying, work on defining the problem in the system, in the process, and then we're going to spend time working on the solution. You know, because what I see a lot, and at the organization I'm at now, they are trying to fix a problem, but they don't know what the process is, and they're just slapping Band-Aids up, and things aren't really working. And then they have these hour-long meetings, and everybody walks away like, well, that didn't solve anything. And I'm like, yeah, it didn't solve anything because you don't know what the problem is, because you haven't gone through the simple steps of figuring out what the problem is. And once we do that, then we can get to the solutions. So processes can make you money or they can cost you money, you know, and in processes are critical in service industries, and efficient processes are going to cost you time and money because poor processes lead to low quality outcomes. You may have to do rework, things like that. And then proper processes are going to be efficient and improve quality. And really, that's what we want to do in healthcare is we're nothing but a big process, and we want to deliver the best quality of care we can. So some characteristics of or aspects of services. Service, what we do is basically intangible. Okay, what I do as an anesthesiologist, it's intangible. Yeah, I got drugs. But the thing about a service is that it's simultaneous production and consumption by the patient, if you will, you know. And the service, what we do is always very close to the patient, if not to the patient. You know, what we do can't really be inventoried. You can't say, oh, I got 15 anesthesia. Well, I'm sure some hospital administrators would like to say I got 15 anesthesiologists sitting on the shelf back there, but you really can't inventory service. It's intangible, and what's important to recognize is that there's simultaneous production and consumption of it. So what is service? Well, service is when we take materials, we take equipment, we take knowledge, technology, facilities, and we use them to create what we call a customer experience. And that's through the personal interaction we have with the patient. It's the ease of use, it's the interaction with other customers, and the responsiveness of the company. And we use all that together to create services and benefits. We create feelings and judgments in the minds of our patients or our customers. So why manage your service? Well, it's better for the company. It's better for you. It's better for your staff. And most importantly, it's better for your patient or your customer. Now, when we talk about service, we got to realize there are two perspectives. You know, there's the inside out, which what you think is going on, and there's the outside in, which what your customer thinks is going on. And what we really want to do is we kind of want to work on merging those two so that, you know, we understand what the customer thinks is going on, and the customer begins to understand what we think is going on, and we're both on the same page. Because when you're not on the same page with that way, that's how you get poor satisfaction scores. Okay, so the company as the company or the individuals who are delivering the service, we have our inputs, we have our processes, and then we have our outputs. Whereas the customer, they perceive the experience, they perceive what we would call our product, which is our processes, and they receive the benefits of what we do for them. And so, in this example, we might say the company is a hospital, and in that hospital, they have emergency rooms, physicians, OR nurses, they got ORs, wards, physical therapy, radiology equipment, and stuff to fix hips, right? And the process that they use is they make diagnosis, treatment, and therapy. And the outcome might be, in this case, if a person fell and broke their hip, they're going to use all those inputs, they're going to go through the processes and eventually get a fixed hip. Now, for the patient, their perspective is not that. Their perspective is, do I get empathetic and timely care? The service is the fixed hip, but the benefit to them is being able to ambulate again and return home. I think a lot of times in healthcare, we get focused on what we do that we lose sight of why we're really there. And that's really that bottom part, which is the benefit to the patient, rather than, oh, we're just going to fix their hip or fix their knee, it's just a work order. No, we're doing it. We're putting all these pieces of this puzzle together to benefit the patient. So what you got to do is you got to know your processes. You got to know every little bit of the process, every step. And the best way to do that is to diagram it. So what I recommend is you sit down and you draw out in a diagram what you think is going on step by step. What's the first step the patient does when they call the office, or they call or they step into the hospital? What's the first thing they do? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? It's not until you begin to diagram it that you begin to understand every little step in that process. And once you begin to understand the process, then when you identify a problem, it becomes much easier to fix. What I see a lot of times is nobody has a diagram for what's going on. In the outpatient surgery center I work at, with pre-op calls and approvals, there's no diagram, there's no flow diagram. We don't know what's going on. And that's why they're having as many problems as they are. And they keep slapping Band-Aids on, yet those things do nothing but create more problems. So like I've told them, you got to diagram it out before you begin to try and solve it. And the other thing sometimes is for you to actually go through the process as a provider as well as a patient. Take it from their perspective. Actually walk through, what is it like for me to roll in from the holding area on a gurney? What would it be like for me to then hop on the bed and they slap a gazillion little EKG leads on me? They're all cold. It's freezing in here. It's sterile. Everybody's wearing these blue masks and they're in these gowns, and it's, and then what's it like to wake up in the ICU, or what would it be like, to spend the day in the ICU? How easy is it to talk to other folks while I'm there? Those sort of things are going to give you great insight into the services that you provide the patients, as well as give you ammo that you can use to impact satisfaction scores and increase the patient's, which is really nothing more than increasing the patient's perception of the quality of the service you provide. So what is your process? So the service concept is really focused on knowing what it is you're doing. And once you understand the nature of it, you can share it with the customer. And more importantly, you share it with the staff. So if you're able to explain it to the customer, the patient, exactly what they're going to experience, and you can share that with the staff. This is exactly what you as a staff member will experience, and this is what we expect the patient to experience. You can go a long ways towards improving patient satisfaction scores. This is what Disney does. Disney, they have that whole thing planned out from the time you step on the property to the time you leave. They have in their mind's eye what they want you to experience, what they want you to feel. And the staff all understand it, and the staff all work together towards that goal on the behalf of Disney. So there are a couple of components when we're talking about improving any service that we really got to start off with and identify before we really dig into the weeds. And that's our mission and purpose. We always want to start off with what's the mission and purpose of not only the organization, but what's the mission and purpose of the of this particular process for this organization. And the mission and purpose is what it is we do and why are we doing it. So for the benefit of the patient. So the mission is what we do. That would be, the patient's got an aortic valve. We do is the process of putting them on bypass, replacing that valve and sending them out on the other side. And the reason we do it would be the why, and that is so that they can regain mobility or regain some normalcy in their daily life. They have more exercise tolerance, and we prevent a heart attack or something. How we do it, that's the service that we provide. All right, and what it is and how we do it, that's the how. So we want to ask, what is it we do? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? And that's when we put all those pieces in line and send them through the process, combining all of our talent from our people, all the equipment. And then what? What is it? The last question would be what? And what is it that we want the customer to experience? What do we want the patient to experience in terms of actually getting a new valve, but also how do they feel about that? How did they feel about that emotionally? And then what are the outcomes that we want them to have? We want to be able to, you want to write these down and be able to speak to them, because we're going to use these answers to these questions are going to help define how we improve processes down the line, because these are going to be our guiding light, if you will, because we're going to refer to what it is we do, why do we do it, how do we do it, and what do we want the patient to experience. That should be the questions we start off with before we try and solve any process, whether it's the process from checking the patient in to getting them to pre-op. That's a process. But we're going to ask these questions. How does that process support the mission and purpose? How does this process, what's that particular service? How do we get it done? And then what do we want the patient to experience during that? And then the next phase, we'd ask the same questions. And the next phase, we'd ask the same questions with the next process. I hope that makes sense. So for an example, for me, my mission and purpose is to help physicians and healthcare providers have the practice they desire by raising their business intelligence through business education. How do I do it? Well, I do it through online education, books, seminars, and consulting. What is the experience I want them to have? I want to make it easy to understand and use, and I want to take these concepts and explain them so that they can easily learn them and then apply them. And I do that, and when I work on my courses and my books, I try to make it as simple as possible for them. And what's the outcome I want? Well, I want them to be financially intelligent so that they are empowered to create the practice they desire. And then anytime I would start a new service, or when I have a hiccup somewhere in this company, I would refer to my mission and purpose and what it is I do, what experience and outcome I want before I would begin to redefine or redesign that process. The same thing happens in the clinical world, I think. And what is we deliver healthcare? Start with that mission and purpose, how, and then what experience and outcome do we want them to have. Now, there's also, we also have many customers. Our customers can be many things. They can be the patient, they can be the hospital, they can be other physicians, they can be health plans, they can be employers. They can also be patient's family. We have many different customers that we're going to need to think about as we have patients go through our organizations, other physicians and other healthcare providers. So we got to be cognizant of how our processes affect them as well. Now, service is a two-way street, and the information flows between you and your customer. And that information leads to changes in the service provided, and hopefully can lead to changes in your customers' expectations. Because what we want to do is we want to do what we can to influence and manage their expectations such that their expectations are, we don't want them unreasonably high and we don't want them unreasonably low. We want them to be reasonable. And by sharing that information flow between you and your customer, you are better able to affect that. So how do we manage our customer satisfaction? Well, their satisfaction is the overall assessment of their perceptions of the service. Okay, it's not whether or not how good you did, it's how good they think you did. Okay, and their processes are their experiences and their outcomes. The expectations, then they experience your service, and after they've experienced your service, they have the perception. And whatever expectations they walk into that service with are going to directly influence and impact their perceptions. Okay, and those perceptions and those expectations kind of feed off each other. And what we want to do is we want to design a service landscape, if you will, that broadly and boldly states what their expectations should be, so that hopefully we can influence perceptions. So we have expectations. Sometimes when we get hiccups, sometimes the expectations and the services don't add up, and then we get poor customer satisfaction. That could be poor service design. They don't really understand or really know what they're expecting, or you may have inadequate resources. Or sometimes we just offer the wrong service, and that service is wrong, and that will dramatically impact their perceptions. So some influencers of how do we influence their expectations? Well, one is going to be the price of our service. There are going to be alternatives in the marketplace, marketing of our organization, our reputation, could be word of mouth, their previous experiences with us, and their current attitude and mood at the time they're experiencing our service, as well as our confidence. I think those last two can be big influencers on their expectations. If they walk in with a bad mood or a bad attitude, that can unfortunately put us behind the eight ball, if you will. Also, the degree of confidence that we portray can also affect that. So we don't want to be overly confident, but we don't want to instill any sort of doubt in their mind as they go under. So so the patients have a zone of tolerance, if you will, and all customers, doesn't matter. You have a zone of tolerance when you're consuming someone else's service. And that zone of tolerance is based upon your expectations, okay? And as we design our processes or we're trying to improve them, we need to consider our patients' expectations to develop that zone of tolerance. So overall satisfaction factors, those are the points where we can actually influence our customer satisfaction. And the research out there shows that satisfaction is heavily influenced by the peaks, either the best or the worst, and how they felt at the end of going through our process or our service. So what we want to do is we want to design our process with the experience and with the end in mind. Okay, so that's what Disney does. Disney, they want you to have a certain experience, and they design all their processes to lead you to that experience, that feeling. We don't control results, we control processes in life. If a truck rolls off the line on Ford and something's wrong, they go back and tweak the line and try and get it right. Same thing with a service. They have a design, they want the F-150 to look this way. When we have a process, we want our patient to have this experience. And that's the way we should be designing our processes. So, if you were to look at a graph like this, the blue or the green line represents, complete satisfaction. Our zone of tolerance is between our blue and our yellow line. And if you hit negative red, that -5 or that red line, you're not doing well at all. So our patients, depending on us, their zone of tolerance may be, they don't have a weight. They're recognized that everybody's friendly and empathetic. And then when they get in there, they may have like a 10-minute wait, and they get meaningful explanations. And, if it's below that zone of tolerance, it may be a 20-minute wait, a cold room, or incorrect diagnoses. And as our patients go through our processes, we can actually influence their overall perception. So let's say our first patient, they wait 10 minutes. The staff is friendly. We're within that zone of tolerance. The physician is on time-ish. Well, we didn't actually hit that mark, so they're still within the zone of tolerance. The staff and the physician are very empathetic. Instructions are given. They understand them. They know what's wrong. The checkout process is easy and quick, and follow-up is completed as promised. Now, if that's that patient's expectations, we've met that zone of tolerance, okay? Because we designed our system that way. And this other example is if they wait less than 10 minutes, the staff is friendly, but they were expecting a longer wait. Well, we've exceeded that. The physician is on time. The staff and everybody's caring. Instructions are given and understood. The checkout is quick and easy, and follow-up is completed. And maybe they have expectations with other physicians or other hospitals or whatnot. Nobody follows up. Well, they're going to walk away very satisfied and very pleased because, their last experience was, they did what they said they would do. They followed up. I wasn't expecting that. So they have a couple high points and some, and then everything else is within the zone of tolerance. That actually is what we're looking for. Now, we can look at my wife's latest visit to a physician. I'm not going to talk about why or who it was rather, but she had to wait more than 45 minutes. So that was outside her zone of tolerance. She was not happy. The staff was very friendly, which she wasn't expecting. But then she had to wait another 30 minutes for the physician in the room. She kind of cut the physician some slack, but bumping along that lower level of tolerance. Then the physician kind of poo-pooed her concern and reason for visiting. Not good. And then he delivered the findings and said, these are the findings. Everything's okay. That was relieved. The checkout was quick and easy. But they said they would follow up with her and never did. So my wife's satisfaction, very low. 3 very low points, and the last one was very, very bad. So but I think they designed that process. They didn't do it intentionally, but their process is designed to do that, to yield unsatisfied patients. And guess what? She has a choice of places she can go, and she's never going back to that place. Whereas if they would have designed their processes or maybe set up different expectations for my wife, she might not be as dissatisfied. But this was her first visit, and they did not do a good job. Now, if she were to go back and still had to wait 45 minutes, that might actually shift her up into the zone of tolerance because she says, I've been here before, they're slow, I'll tolerate that, okay? But it's all based upon experiences and expectations that are set up. Word on the street was that, they get you in and out real quick. And that didn't happen for her. And the fact that the physician kind of poo-pooed her reason for visiting, huge. I really should have made that like -10, but I didn't want to mess with my graph. But just be aware that when we design and deliver healthcare, this is really how our patients determine whether or not we deliver good care. So what are some factors that affect your quality? Well, access, aesthetics, helpfulness, availability, concern and empathy, cleanliness, comfort, communication, staff commitment, competency, flexibility, friendliness, integrity, and responsiveness. Those are all some things that we can use to think about as we're designing services. There's a Robert Johnson in 1995 released a study in the Journal of Service Industry Management, and he was actually looking at banks in Great Britain. But this really applies to all service industries, and he used a Herzberg-ish, what I call Herzberg-ish model. Herzberg was a leadership gentleman who did a lot of studies on organizational behavior and leadership in the, I think it was 60s or 70s. And he had a theory that said we have either hygiene or how to motivate an employee, either have hygiene items or you have motivational items. He said you either have he said for hygiene, you need a nice workplace. You meet some of these metrics. Pay, you pay them well. They won't be dissatisfied, but they'll be satisfied, but they won't be dissatisfied. But he said you needed these motivational things in order to move them from a satisfied to a motivated patient or a employee. Well, Johnson, he took that model and applied it to service. And he said, satisfaction is not the opposite of dissatisfaction or delight. Rather, it's just the absence of it, of satisfaction, but it's not the opposite. And there are some things that will delight a patient or a customer, but it really, you can't really delight them unless you satisfy some other things. Now, there are two types of factors, he said. He said there are hygiene factors. He said these have to be in place to satisfy the client or the customer. If they're absent, they guaranteed you will dissatisfy that person. And then there are enhancing features or factors. These would be the motivational factors in the leadership one, but in the customer service, they're enhancing. And that says these can delight if present, but if absent, they will not lead to dissatisfaction. And then in their study, they looked at a bunch of different things, and they looked at, attentiveness was a big way to delight people. Responsiveness, about 50-50. You really got to be responsive to satisfy, and if you're uber responsive, you'll delight them. Care, whether you treat them with care, more of a delight. Availability. If you're not available, you'll dissatisfy, but if you are readily available, you're not necessarily going to delight, but you will satisfy. Reliability, if you're unreliable, that will greatly dissatisfy, but if you're reliable, it's, that's what I expect. That goes back to those expectations. Integrity, if you don't have integrity, notice that, if you don't do what you say you're going to do or act with integrity, that is a huge dissatisfying thing. And in no place does integrity delight anybody. So I think that speaks to a common innate human expectation. Friendliness, they expect you to be friendly. That will delight them. Courtesy, communication, they expect more to satisfy. Competency, functionality, commitment, aesthetics, and cleanliness. So the essence of that study says if you want to dissatisfy people, be slow to respond, don't be available, don't be reliable, don't have integrity, don't communicate, and don't be competent. If you do those things, you're guaranteed to dissatisfy people. But if you do those things, you're not necessarily guaranteed to delight them, but you may just satisfy them. To delight them, you want to be very responsive, very attentive, demonstrate that you care about them, be very friendly, and communicate with them frequently and openly, and be competent. And you can actually, in your touch points with the patient, as they go through your organization, you really want to focus on those. Everybody in that process is showing them attentiveness, is being responsive, is showing that they're caring about them, they're being friendly, they're openly and readily communicating with them, answering all their questions, and everybody's competent. If you do that and you make sure that every touch point is hitting those things, that's a surefire way to at least set yourself up for delighting the patient. So when we design our customer experience, you really got to make a map. There's no other way around it. You can't. This is not something you can just think is in the ether there. I recommend you draw it out. You write the process out. And so first off, for this would be like taking a patient in PACU. For a high level, patient arrives in PACU, we assess, we treat, we identify the next appropriate place they go, either the floor home or the unit, and then we provide report to that place, and then we transfer them. That's a high level process, but we're beginning to set up steps that happen in that process. And until we do that, we're not going to have much success at making change and affecting good change when we don't draw these out. Now, the next step would be after you do that, you would sit down with some folks and make a detailed list, right? The patient arrives in PACU and we create an algorithm similar to this. Get a little more granular detail, if you will. And then after, we sit down with our team, everybody that's involved in the process, we sit down as a team and we work on this together. And we include everyone, and we get everybody's input. After we've created a list like this, then we can create what we call a swim lane. And the swim lane is where we look at who's responsible for what, where are the information handoffs, because usually it's information handoffs and stuff like that where things go awry. So as you can see, the nurse has quite a bit of tasks to do. The CRNA arrives, provides that transport and that report. There's a handoff there. That might be an area where we would expect to see some misinformation or gaps. And then the nurse, the PACU nurse, would then follow an algorithm similar to this. Sometimes they might need to contact the physician with abnormalities or whatnot. But this then begins to delineate roles and responsibilities in that process in the PACU. And then we can begin to really hone in on, okay, where are the problem points and in whose area and domain is that? And does it need to be on that domain, or do we need to shift it down to somebody else's domain? But it's not until we write these out and we make these maps that we're able to really do that. I mean, and that's what, like I said, with my outpatient surgery center, they're trying to make these pre-op screening calls easier, and they're making them harder because they don't have a map. If they would just, we're doing that next week. We're meeting and we're going to make a map of the process so people understand the steps, and then we can begin to better understand where the information and the mistakes are coming. But you can't do that effectively until you draw these out. So when we're doing these process improvement initiatives, some questions we want to ask is, does this particular process support the mission and purpose of the business or the organization? And like I said, that's where we start. We start with the mission and purpose. What it is we do, why do we do it, how do we do it, and what do we want for experiences and outcomes for the patient? And then we ask, does this process help that? And if not, then why do we have the process? Or if it's not, what do we need to change in it to make it do that? Does each activity add value? There are some that will add value that don't touch the patient, and then there are some that don't add, and that do add value that directly touch the patient. But we need to make certain that each activity is going to add value in some way, shape, or form, whether it adds value in terms of information or knowledge to the providers providing care to that patient, or it's actually, delivering medicine to the patient. Each activity in the process should add value, and who's responsible for this process, and that's easier to determine once you map that out and you create those swim lane charts. Once you create those swim lane charts, then that becomes a little easier to understand who owns it and who's responsible for it. Who's the boss? Is this process in control? How many errors are we getting? And then how efficient is the process? And how can we make it better? How can we improve it? And is it possible to develop a standard for this process? The best thing to do is you want to create a process that will apply to many different people. That way you don't have to have a bunch of individual processes, but you just know that once they enter this process or they enter this unit, I know that things are going to go this way. And everybody in that unit knows how things are going to go. And the patient should have an idea of how things are going to go because everybody else does. And, does this process need to be made part of, does it need to be moved up, back in line? Or we have bottlenecks that we got to worry about? Or does it need to be shifted somewhere in the overall process? So who's involved it's going to take a team effort. And what you want to do is you want to identify all parties involved in the process. And I mean everybody who's involved in the process, not just a few select people. You do want you want to pick a champion or two. But I also suggest, it's kind of contrary, but I suggest A negative Nancy always sometimes provides insightful data as to why things are bad. And they may actually give you good information rather than Pollyanna-ish, everything's going to be great. You want to gather all the facts and data in the material, and then sit down and work with those members to create a process map. I did this at my old hospital for a pre-op clinic. We had a pre-op clinic, and things weren't happening. And so what we did is we had a meeting. It was probably a 3-hour meeting in the middle of the afternoon. We shut the clinic down. We had everybody in the room, and we walked through and we created maps very similar to what I showed you for how do we get a patient preoperatively cleared for the hospital. What are the steps? What is the data handed off? Where are we seeing bottlenecks? And when we had everybody there, we had a better understanding of what their individual tasks were in that process, what sort of hurdles they needed to overcome to make it better. So start simple. First, make an overall map, and then make a detailed map. And then finally, like I said, create a swim lane map. So what you want to do is, after you've identified the roles, is you want to validate the map. You want to sit down and go through the process, maybe implement it, see if your map really is working like it's supposed to, and then identify quick fixes, things that you can really see good improvement on with relatively little effort. So start with the mission and purpose, begin with the end in mind, identify all the processes, and rank them according to how well they work, the number of complaints each process has, and after you create that ranking, you're gonna also want to make certain everybody agrees on their start and finish points. So when's the process start? When's it end? Make sure everybody agrees with that. And then after you rank your processes, it'll give you an idea of where to look. So what you want to do is you want to pick processes that are what we call quick wins, right? They're high impact but low effort. And if you understand all the processes and systems, and you know which ones have a lot of complaints, but it really wouldn't take much to tweak it, that might be a quick win to get that. The next one you want to maybe work on are the low impact, low effort, which are the fill-ins. And then major projects are going to be the ones that are a lot of high effort, but they have a high impact. After you've taken option 1 and 2, go to option 3 on your processes and really work on those areas that are going to be a lot of work, but they're going to have big impact. And then you focus on those because you've already cleaned up all the little stuff. And then avoid thankless tasks. Okay, those are the ones that require a lot of effort and they don't do much. Don't do those. Don't waste your time. It's gonna demoralize your staff. So avoid, if you can, those thankless tasks. Start with one, do the fill-ins, and then also work on your major projects. So questions to ponder as we analyze our maps or our processes is, where are the bottlenecks? What might be causing delays? I mean, how much rework is required? Are we having to redo things? I know for a while, one of our centers, we kept having to redo the consent forms because they weren't quite right. And then that delayed patient going to the OR and stuff like that. Well, how do we fix that? Where are the errors occurring? Is there any role ambiguity? Do people not understand what they're supposed to be doing and what they're responsible for? I find that happens quite a bit. People don't really understand, or they haven't had to explain to them what their role is. And that might be due to the fact that the organization doesn't understand the whole process. Are there any steps that are duplicated? What are steps are unnecessary, and can we eliminate them? You always kind of, as a continual process improvement, you always want to be thinking to yourself, what step can I eliminate in order to make this thing more efficient? And then where are the handoffs? And in healthcare, that's where we have a lot of errors, handoff errors. So where are those, and what do we need to do to be extra vigilant to ensure that errors don't occur at that time when we're handing off work? So what I like to do is, when I'm doing workshops, is we start with a simple exercise. We're gonna, I have folks outline a process, and that's just to make a cup of coffee, right? And it's a good exercise because it's something silly, but it's but it demonstrates the value of drawing out these maps and making these processes on paper. So you want to define, have the team define where the start and end points are. And once we do that, have them develop the process. And, you got coffee, coffee grounds, coffee maker, and then have at it and figure out, I want you guys to map out for me this. And then after we do that, then they can begin to, once they understand what the goal is, it makes the next session and making the processes maps a lot easier and a lot faster. So during this exercise, you want to, did everyone discover and understand the importance of a process map? Does everyone did everyone agree with and determine start points? And how did you guys determine that? If there were disagreements, how was that dealt with? And how might these types of disagreements be handled in the future? Because you're going to have disagreements on either start points, stop points, what's a bottleneck, what's important, and how you deal with that as a team is going to be incredibly important to your success. And then, did everyone participate? That's important. If you got somebody in the room that's not really participating, why? Why aren't they participating? I mean, if they are a part, they're part of the process. If they're delivering care, they're starting an IV, they're pushing meds, whatnot, they're part of the process. We want them to be involved. I would want them to speak up. I want to know their point of view. And if they're not doing that, I'd like to know why they're not. Because is it a leadership thing, a personal thing? Is it the personality? But at least understand where they're coming from and why they're not engaging. So once you got your map, use it. And what you do is we take these maps and we show them to everybody who's in that process. So like in the PACU, we would have this map and we would share it with everyone in PACU. Or in pre-op clinic, we shared the intake in that pre-op clinic. We shared it with the scheduler. We shared it with the RNs, the PA, and the residents that worked in the clinic, so that everybody knew what the processes were. Everybody could refer to it, so they'd know exactly what step they're on and what the next step is. And we were able to improve efficiency and really drop number of rework and delays because everybody used that map, not just me as the pre-op clinic coordinator. But what you want to avoid is interview only. Don't interview just a handful of people when you're trying to do process improvement. Don't make maps of the processes you wish you had rather than the one that exists. It's good to know where you want to go, but you really got to know what you have. And then that's your starting point. And then you can tweak things to get where you want, but don't make the pie in the sky. Make the one that you actually have so you know where your problems are. Don't ignore the opinions of those who actually probably know the process the best, who live it every day. Really listen to them. They would be the subject matter expert. Listen to them, take their advice, and do not put the map on the shelf or in a drawer and never look at it again, because this really becomes a map for you to, as you're going through it, and then maybe you revisit it in 6 months, 9 months, a year, and say, how has this changed? What needs to be changed? How do we get better? And you continually refer to these maps as part of continual process improvement. So there are 4 steps to process improvements: planning, and then we execute, we do, we check, and then we act. And then we go back to the plan stage. That's the whole cycle of continual process improvement. So in the plan phase, what we want to do is we want to begin with our overall mission and purpose. What it is that we do, what service do we provide our patients, and why do we do this, and what are the problems that we hope to solve. And then we want to define the current situation. So what is our current situation? That's through our own personal observations. We want to interview people who are actually involved in that process, and through that we can identify key people and get their input, maybe hopefully make them champions. And then we want to create the visual map of the process. Sometimes when we walk into process improvements, we're going to bring problems. Some of those problems are going to be broad. They're going to be vague. Some are going to be really defined issues, and others are going to be low priority. But we're going to want to rank each problem accordingly. Is it a low priority? Well, guess where low priorities go? They go at the back. If it's really defined or something that can be easily fixed, maybe we're going to make that an option one, a quick win, and we're going to define that. Then we're going to set SMART targets, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, for each of our process improvement changes we want to make. And then we're going to do root cause. What should have happened? Why didn't it happen? Who could have, what could have prevented the problem? And ask why at least 5 times when you're trying to get to that. Why didn't this happen? Why? And eventually you're going to get down to the real cause of the problem. And it might be a bottleneck that you can't overcome, or maybe you can move or can't. But what you want to do is you want to get down to the nitty gritty. You want to solve the real problem that's impeding your ability to deliver good care. So then we want to do, and that's where we gather ideas. We're going to bring our team together and we're going to brainstorm. And there's no such thing as a bad idea. When I do these things, we just, and Chad and I, we throw everything on the board. It doesn't matter. And then after everybody has their ideas up there, then we go through as a group and we narrow down the choices that we think are probably the best ones to maybe test or go on with further detail. But at least everybody, hopefully you get everybody brainstorming things, and sometimes you'll get ideas from people that you never thought would have a good idea. I've had that with some old partners of mine. Like, wow, that was a really good idea. I'm sorry, I thought that you would never have a good idea. But I won't tell you who it was, Susan. But anyway, just be open to other people having good ideas. Then you want to revisit. You want to re-examine each issue and test it, and go back and say, does this support the mission and purpose? Does this eliminate any complex, make it less complex? Is there less confusion? And are we going to meet our goals? And does it really address the root cause problem that we identified? And does it pass a common sense logic test? Does this make sense, what we propose? Define your countermeasures. Your countermeasures, who's responsible, who supports the responsible party, what are the steps needed to implement this countermeasure or this fix for it, how are we going to measure our progress in terms of getting towards our fix? And then when do we think where this is going to get done? We want to generate buy-in with folks. And the best way to do that is through communication. And we relate the problems or the fixes. We always relate that back to the mission and purpose of the organization. So this is why we're making this change. I know it's not going to be fun, and maybe, but we're really doing this because of what we're doing and why we're doing it for the benefit of the patient. And that's a great way to generate buy-in for folks. You want to consider the financial impact of the problem and the financial impact of this fix, and make certain that you've really laid out timelines and metrics and reporting processes, and everybody understands maybe their new role in whatever you're implementing. You want to build and brief your implementation team, and make certain everybody knows. Again, this is part of that communication, is make certain everybody knows what their new roles are, who's responsible for what. That way they know what they're responsible for, and they can help hold others accountable. Be willing to answer questions, and be willing to defend the reason why you're making the change. And if you're not able or willing to do that, then maybe you're not the one who should be doing it. Then you want to execute your plan, and don't focus on perfection. Change is the path to perfection is little baby steps at a time. And as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other and you keep getting better and better, that's really what we're working on. Because really we'll never hit perfection, but we always can get better and better and better, just like Toyota did. And be willing to adjust your course when needed. What you want to do is adjust as little as possible during a trial, implementation, but after you've been trialing for a while and you think you need to make an adjustment, be willing to do that. Don't be married to this change or the decision you make. You can always make a new decision, and we hopefully are collecting data, and we're looking at our metrics or our guideposts and say, okay, we're not going to hit it doing this. I think if we make this tweak, we can get there. And then don't be afraid to implement that. And then we check. Always analyze your metrics at each milestone. Are you meeting your goals? Are there any adjustments that need to be made? Are we having morale and attitude issues amongst the people inside the process? Why is that? How do we fix that? And then do we need to make any adjustments? I think that morale and attitude thing is real important, particularly since people are the folks that deliver service in healthcare, and how they think and feel impacts the quality of care that organization delivers and that perceived value by the patient. So be real cognizant of that. Revisit and document each countermeasure, and ask yourself, was the patient experience really improved after we implemented this change? Did we reduce complexity? Did we reduce confusion in the users? And did we hit our target? Was the root cause addressed? Did we have positive change, and what were the financial impacts? Did we save money? Did it cost us money? And are we better off now than we were before? And you want to write those down and then act, roll it out across the organization, distribute create a document, distribute the diagrams to everybody, create maybe a step-by-step guide. So that's another thing we can do is when we onboard people, if we have these processes diagrammed and we have these processes written out, when we bring new people on, they can get on board faster. Training can go down because we have it documented, like this is how we do things and this is why we do it. And then review your progress at 6 and 12 months and track your metrics on a monthly basis. If you want to contact or connect with me, there's my podcast. But if you go to that Sanibel, you'll have a list or my checklist for I use a checklist for every process improvement I use based on plan, do, act, and all that, and check and act. And I have those questions and some worksheets that you can download if you go to davidnorrismda.com/Sanibel. You can also get that there. My clients have found that to be very helpful and very useful as they begin to really sit down. And if they want to make good change, the ones that have used it said it's been easier making change by using that checklist. So that's yours for free. And with that, I'm done. Excuse me.
Thank you, Dr. Norris. That was fantastic. You and Quint Studer have a lot in common. We did exactly the same thing, and basically all the way to the notes. We brought in managers from every department, even the cafeteria, valet parking, everybody in one room, physicians that sat with these people, and then we did posters, little notes on the wall, and then we kind of condensed them down to 4 things. We actually found out that patient satisfaction in this area was, we found out from one time we were getting very poor scores. We went back and we traced those steps. We found it where the valet, we had just hired a valet parking company, and they were really kind of rude to the people when they initially came in the hospital. So therefore that rolled all the way over to the patient satisfaction and the hospital scores just from valet parking. So therefore it affects everybody, not just the physicians or the patient care people. It's from the food they get from everybody in there. He pretty much he's been doing that, and I learned from him that same satisfaction score and how we set up a roadmap. I like your Swimlane attitude. We said one-stop shopping, more or less, and thing. It was really good. And thank you. I think that's what every organization and every company ought to be doing at this point in time. But thank you very much.
Yep. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's it was my service operations class in my MBA program that I learned a lot of this and really made it like, oh, never really thought of it that way. I always thought good service was making the diagnosis and, treating it. Well, it goes much beyond that. And the bigger the organization, the more variables and touch points you have, I think the more you're at risk for not meeting those patients' expectations or meeting their satisfaction. So,
Dr. Norris, excellent presentation. And again, the chat board has lit up with comments, and appreciate all the information you're offering. I think that, we are a service industry, and even though as perfusionists, we spend a lot of time in the OR, we're still walking from the parking deck to the changing room, and we're still going to come across, clients or families that need help with directions or just a friendly hello.
Yep.
I've also, hear from patients that, they just don't get communicated, families of patients that are maybe sedated, they just don't get communicated to as much as we think so. And we think that the other person might be doing it, but not us, or not that, whatever. We forget that sometimes they're not being communicated to in the way they're supposed to. Now, I know there's certain limitations on what we, as maybe say perfusionists, should say to the patient's families. But on the other hand, I think if we can assist in any way possible to make their experience at our institutions favorable, obviously that's like you say, it goes from the janitor to the CEO or whatever. I'm not putting the janitor on the bottom. We're all important, but just to go ahead and make that an important. So how did you get so passionate about this? Because I've seen that comment in many compliment in many.
Well, so my journey started in my MBA class. So I surveyed every physician in my county. It was about 1,100, and I snail mailed these surveys. And it was part of a quantitative analysis class. And I said, what problems are you facing in your practice? What do you feel good about? What do you feel bad about? And the first thing was financial reports. The second one was negotiations. And the third was improving processes, or why isn't my clinic running right? And so I said, well, those are all the same questions I had. Maybe I'll start working on those and making educational material to help them, make little steps to improve things. So, with process improvement, if you're in the process, you can either get bitter and angry that it's not working, and that can lead out to burnout and depression, or you can say, I'm going to help try and solve this, and this is how I think we can solve it, and I'm going to try and make it better. And for me, that's been the best way for me to avoid that bitterness and anger. Is all right. Well, I have a few tools I can use. Let's see if we can't make this better for everybody. So that's how I got started.
Very good. Hey, thank you very much, Dr. Norris. I have one more question too, or thought for you. When you were implementing change, which is tough, it's very tough to implement change, I'll just say. But how do you get everybody to drink the Kool-Aid to agree on these changes? Because a lot of them say, I don't want to do that. That's how we've always done this. How do you start with that type of, attitude and stuff?
For that, what I recommend is you start with that mission and purpose. What is it that we do as an organization, and why are we doing it? Because I would assume that your mission and purpose as a provider in this organization should mesh with the organization's mission and purpose, right? And so I would start the argument there saying, well, we both are kind of on the same page. We both want to do what's best and improve. And then I would take it into, well, how's the current situation working? We're not making it. We're not hitting it. However, I think with these steps, if we implement this, I think we're going to get there. And isn't that what you want to do? I mean, don't you want them to get better? As long as it meshes up with the companies, and then the other thing is the organization has to live the mission and purpose every day. You can't just say it and not do it. You actually have to live it. And that's come from leading from example. And if you're not leading from example, you're going to have a hard time getting buy-in. So the organization they have to lead by example. They have to really live that mission and purpose. And if they don't, then yeah, you're going to get pushed back. And I can't say that I don't blame them a little.
Yeah. Well, you're a breath of fresh air. Thank you very much for your presentation today and presentation.
All right. Well,
Plural.
I hope you guys learned something. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.